We are here again today with Christina from Fictionary, and we are going through our final section of the story arc series within the overall 38 story elements. And it's been quite a journey. So we're going to talk about that. We've been through the inciting incident. We've been through plot point 1, the middle, plot point 2, and finally we're at the monumental climax. So Christina, tell us about the climax, what it is, and where we're finding it, and how to do it, blah, blah, blah.
Okay, so first, I want to remind everybody why we're doing this. And I'm going to take you back just very quickly to the first Anglo-Saxon story written in 750 BC, followed the story arc exactly. And that's the story arc has been used in this form across time. For all commercially successful books, the books that have stayed around forever, and they might not be commercially successful if they were published now, but at the time, the commonality between the stories is the form of the story arc. And that's why this is so critical. And now we're coming up to the most important scene in the book. And if you blow it, you won't have readers following you. So it is critical to get the climax right.
Right. Okay. So we've been through all the story arcs. So tell us, in the climax, what is it? How do we know it's a climax?
You've built your story up with rising action that we talked about from plot point 2, and then you're at the climax. Well, the climax has the highest level of conflict, or the greatest tension, or the most devastating emotional upheaval, right? So it's the scene with the big whammy in it. And it's the scene where your protagonist is going to achieve their goal or fail. So one or the other. You want to be careful that you're satisfying the reader, leaving a cliffhanger at this point. Very dangerous, and you can lose readers. So this is where it's make it or break it.
Right. Right. Very important. Super important. And where is it located in our book? Because we've been talking about percentages and how to find it, locate it. I mean, obviously it should stick out. If it's not, then you already have a problem. But in general, the story arc has a pattern, and we want to make sure that we have the strongest story arc. So where is it located?
Yeah. So it comes somewhere between 80 and 90% of your story. And it can be a little earlier if you're writing a series, because you might need a bit more time in the resolution to set up the next book. If it's a standalone book, you want it a little later because the reader wants the story to be over. And typically a reader will know if they're writing a series or not, and that's the expectations.
Important, super important. So how do we use it? How do we use it?
So it's, it should be really fun to write because it should be the most exciting scene. And so I'll give you an example. I read a book where the midpoint had an unbelievably tense scene of this woman in a car, and the car's gone underwater in a river and she's trying to get out. And it was such a stressful, well-written scene. And then the climax didn't live up to it. And so it was like, oh, okay, well, that was dull. And it's only if it had been standalone, if the middle scene hadn't been so strong, the climax would have been good for the book. But because the middle scene was so strong, you think, and okay, I felt really let down. And you think, okay, well, that should have been edited. Really, someone should have helped the writer pull that up, or the writer should have used Storyteller and figured out what to do with the climax. However, so with the climax, the protagonist must be in the climax scene. They must have the point of view. So that's non-negotiable. If they don't, your reader will be disappointed. They don't want to hear about it from somebody else's point of view. They followed 300 pages of this character striving for a goal, and they want to see what was that character's reaction to that goal. Get it or not get it, doesn't matter. What's their reaction? That matters. And the reaction can come out in the resolution. But if they don't experience the climax from the eyes of the protagonist, the reader won't feel it from their eyes either, and it's disappointing.
Okay. And what are pitfalls that we need to avoid when we're trying to make sure this climax? I mean, we need to have this transition, the emotions, the success or the failure. What do we not need to include, or, give us some guidelines here?
Yeah, so things not to include. That's a great question. No backstory, no flashback. Those are the easy ones. Get rid of all of it. And if you need backstory at this point in the novel, it's a problem, because backstory is there to provide character motivation. And the reader better know what the character motivation is before the climax. So if you have backstory there, look for, does the reader need to know it? And if the answer is yes, get it out of the climax and put it earlier.
Right.
The other thing is, don't close off minor subplots in the climax. Those can be done before the climax or in the resolution. The climax is about the protagonist's plot. And so if by chance it closes off smaller subplots, that's fine, but it has to flow naturally with the protagonist's main goal for the story. And how do we know the main goal? Well, it comes right back to the blurb that we've talked about of, is it related to that? And I just edited a book that had a fabulous climax scene, except the climax was not about the opening inciting incident, what the protagonist's problem and goal was for the book. It solved a different side problem and never answered the main problem to the blurb. And so it was very easy to edit from an editor's perspective to say, your goal for this book is here. And really, all you need to do is relocate the scene, write it from this character's point of view, and a few other little things. And now it's a climax related to the story and not a great climax scene that has nothing to do with the plot line.
Right. Exactly. So I think that that's super important. So we're going to take a look at our blurb, and we need to do our homework today, of course, but the significance of that and how it blends in, not only for you to monitor yourself, but how the editor can confirm or point out weaknesses is based upon this, you know, are you following what you said you're going to do or not? So how do we go into our homework today? We're pulling out the blurb again.
Yeah, so we're going to pull out the blurb. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about Gone Girl, because we're now at the Gone Girl climax, right? So I'm sorry for, you know, the spoiler alert to, you know, anyone who's not read the book yet, because it was an awesome book. And it's, even if with this, if you go back and read it now, knowing what all the key points are, pay attention to them, and it will help you learn, right? It's a great way to learn because it's really clear in this book what they are, and they're in the right spots.
Awesome.
So the inciting incident, Nick comes home, his wife is missing, that's Amy, and there's blood in the kitchen. Plot point 1, Amy's left him a clue, so he knows that she's up to this. Somebody else didn't kidnap her, so he has to do something about it. He can't turn back. In the middle, his reputation is tanked in the media, and he does a press conference, and Amy's secret best friend attacks him and accuses him of killing her, so he knows he now has to be proactive and prove his innocence.
Right.
Plot point 2, the not so nice Amy comes home and lies about the kidnapping. Nick wants to desperately leave her, and he can't, because she has set the whole thing up that he is 100% framed for attempted murder. So she has it over him. So in the climax, now it just gets a little bit nasty. But so Nick decides, okay, he's written a novel and he's going to reveal the story of what she did. And he thinks he's got the upper hand. He's walking into the climax scene. He's ready to go. And whammo, she's pregnant. So she owns him. He needs to protect his unborn child. He'll never be able to leave her. Never. This is a negative character arc in the story, clearly. Poor Nick never gets out of this. And, you know, you think going into the climax, and it's such a big whammy that you physically feel it when you read this scene. It's so strong. It's so emotionally done. The protagonist is there. The antagonist is there. And there you go. And the whole story, you know, in the blurb is about his wife's disappearing and stuff. So it all links back to, you know, and she is a very good example of an unreliable character.
Right.
Because her story is told up until she shows up in her journal. And so it's her truth and untruths that are in that journal. And so you never really know. And as you get farther into the books, like, oh, this isn't good for Nick. And then it's not good for Nick.
Okay. Poor Nick.
For the homework, check your blurb. And this is where, go back and read just the story arc scenes. Read the inciting incident back to back with plot point 1, the middle, plot point 2, and the climax, and make sure they are going in the right order of action and tension, so that you're having this arc that goes up of excitement. Now for Nick, his emotional arc goes down, which is fine, it's changed, but the tension in the story goes up all the way through. And if you read them back to back, you can see if you got the tension balance right between all 5 scenes.
Exactly. Because you can compare them. You'll know,
Mhm,
you know. I love that example of if it's too, you know, to make sure that it's balanced where it should be balanced in terms of the most powerful
mhm,
being exactly there. So, okay, excellent. So we're going to go back through our blurb. We're going to go back through our story today. Not just our scenes and our blurbs, but our story, reread and enjoy it from a conscious perspective of, okay, how did I write this? Was I following this story arc or not? And if not, get
mhm,
some help or, you know, play with it because again, this is a time for revisions. This is a time for structural developmental changes before you go into the next level of line editing and you're just dealing with the grammar, spelling, punctuation, voice and tones and things like that. Now is the time to really deal with the story. So it's very exciting for both editors and writers. And I couldn't be more excited about what we've covered in the last couple of weeks. So again, Christina, thank you for sharing this with us. I'm so glad that we get to talk from behind the scenes of what editors do and how we help one another. I do recommend everyone to go over to Fictionary. They have Storyteller there, and you can map out your story arc. You know, just upload your manuscript there, check it out. It's really cool to do that.